Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the summer. We are here with Fly Like Me, PhD. I am Dr. Maya, and I have a really wonderful guest for us today that is going to talk about getting Black women paid. So, without further ado, if you wanted to introduce yourself, we would love to hear all about you.
Absolutely. Well, first, thanks for having me, Dr. Maya. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Tine Zekis, and I am the founder and CEO of Getting Black Women Paid. I help Black women double their income without burnout, without getting another degree, without getting another certification, right? So, whether that's in corporate, you're working to advance in your career, or you're starting a business on the side. So, I help folks who are either in business or in their corporate roles. We do it all. So, that's just sort of the beginning intro of me. I'm sure we'll get into more of it as we go.
That is so great, Teen. Just hearing what you have done for Black women, we are so thankful to you for all of
Mhm.
your hard work. One of the biggest issues is the fact that for a long, long time slash forever, Black women have not been paid right what they
Right.
deserved. And so having somebody like you to work on that is a great resource for us. Could you tell us about your business, how you got started, how long it has existed, and what really inspired you to do this type of work?
Yeah, yeah, of course. So I'll kind of start at the end with what inspired me. So for my own journey, I was a high school math teacher. I was overworked, underpaid. I couldn't afford my own apartment. I was swimming in credit card debt, and the stress of the day to day work. I was having panic attacks. I was losing weight. Like it was not it. And so I actually made a pivot into software engineering. I did a boot camp. I learned how to code. And within 2 years of that move, I had doubled my teaching salary. And in less than 5 years, I tripled it. And during that time, I was mentoring other Black women kind of informally, how to negotiate, how to make a pivot into a new career. And I was also speaking in conferences on imposter syndrome, especially for career changers, for women in tech, for people of color in tech. And it was beginning of 2022, I decided to stop speaking for free. And so that was when I started my business, was to get paid to speak. And so I was trying to do this speaking business, and I just was not feeling it. Like, I wasn't trying to do these cold emails to companies about, do you want someone to speak? And I was talking with a coach, and she said, well, what lights you up? And I said, getting Black women paid. And that was it. She said, get on GoDaddy, look up gettingblackwomenpaid.com and buy it up. And so that was when I really made the pivot into more officially coaching other Black women. And so, yeah, so we've been out here since like mid 2022. And for a while, it was all salary negotiation, pivots in career, because that was the work that I had done. But basically, since the 2024 election, most of the Black women I've talked to, even if we're having a conversation about career, they'll be like, well, until I'm doing my own thing. Like, all of us are trying to start a business, right? And so, end of 2024, beginning of 2025 is when I made my pivot to also be helping sort of those budding entrepreneurs to really launch their businesses. And so that's where we are today.
That is fantastic. I love the story that you told about how you were also a person
Mhm.
that was not getting paid well, that had to do a career shift,
Yeah.
right? There's so many people that have to end up doing that and really just being there and being present for Black women, and that's something that really filled you up and made you
Mhm.
happy, and you wanna continue doing that, and that's really beautiful. So, in terms of what you mentioned, this is just a slight pivot out of curiosity. What would you say to people that are interested in doing a career change? Like, what was that transition
Mm.
for you?
Oh, such a great question. I mean, for me, the reason I started speaking about imposter syndrome was because there is so much of that embedded in making a career pivot, right? For myself, I remember I was having lunch with my colleagues and they were talking about, oh, yeah, when I was building computers in high school. And I'm like, I was almost 30 when I learned how to code. But what I realized was that those folks who were building computers in high school and then they went on to a computer science degree in college and then they did coding for the rest of their career had none of the skills that I had picked up in my previous career. And so, what I say to people who are making a pivot or making a career change is that you're bringing a wealth of experience that a lot of the people on that team don't have. When I was in my interview for my first developer role, I said, I'm a developer who can speak human. I can break down a concept and meet people where they're at, whether or not they come from a technical background, which is not a skill that every software developer has, right? And so you want to think about leveraging that additional experience instead of thinking of it as a deficit. Oh, I wasn't doing this, I wasn't doing that. No, I was doing a bunch of other stuff that nobody else here has done.
That I love that you said that because I do feel that we're kind of socialized to choose
Mhm.
a career very early, right? What do you want to be when you grow up, right?
Yep.
Step 1.
Yep.
And then you're supposed to just be in that forever, and that is where
Mhm.
you're supposed to retire, the end of the story. But
Yep.
then sometimes you get into it and you're like, "I actually don't like this." Or like what you mentioned is that you doing multiple things, being in different jobs gives you more experience and
Right.
can really help to inform the job that you're in. So,
Yeah.
that was really good that you said.
And sometimes you can even do a move that feels a little bit more parallel, right? Like if you're going from education into tech, for instance, maybe you start out at an ed tech company where you say, "Hey, I used to be your ideal client. So I'm bringing this perspective as a former administrator or a former teacher or whatever that you all need because that's your ideal client," right? So there are so many of those. Um, I mean, my example, of course, is education to tech, but there's so many spaces where you could find an organization that kind of overlaps with the sort of work you've already done and say, hey, like I'm the perfect person because I can meet at the intersection of those things.
Yeah, that's great. That's great to be able to, like, convince them
Yeah.
that this is the ideal client, and this is not what we are really focusing on, but I think what you're talking about, specifically, like, in terms of your resume, I think a lot of times we
Mhm.
get held back by the resume where, like, we don't have
Yes.
exactly what is listed in that job description, so we can't apply. But what you talked about is, like, kinda convincing people or telling them how you can still be an asset without those exact things that are listed in that description.
Mhm. But first you got to convince yourself. Right? That's where the imposter syndrome comes in, right? First, you need to believe it. I am an asset for these reasons, and that's a big challenge. And so that's one of the things that I start with when I'm working with folks is that self-belief.
Yeah. That's a good point. We do have to work on ourselves and convincing ourselves that we're able. I think half of it is not our fault, right?
Oh,
The
yeah.
society has done a wonderful job making us feel like we are not able to do certain things. And
Yep.
then what you mentioned about that imposter syndrome is where
Mhm.
we come in and we're also not feeling particularly good about the things.
Yeah.
So I noticed that behind you is a book that we all should be reading. Could you tell us about your book? There we go. How can we buy it? Where do we need to be? What is your book about?
Yes, yes. So, we've already touched on it. My book is Overcoming Imposter Syndrome at Work: The Black Woman's Guide to Conquer Perfectionism, Stop Overthinking, and Thrive in Your Career. And I always preface this by saying that, we are not, imposter syndrome, it's not a real diagnosis. It sounds very clinical, but it doesn't actually mean something's wrong with you. Especially for Black women, there are systems in place specifically designed to make us feel like we don't belong. And so imposter syndrome, it's not, "Oh, you're crazy." It's like, "No, you just have your eyes open and people are telling you every day that you don't belong here." So I call those imposter systems, right? Those are the structures, the systems that are built to keep us out. But you know, I wasn't gonna write a book about, like, here's how we dismantle the patriarchy and white supremacy, like, we all do need to work on that, but in the meantime, you still need to live your life, right? You still need to thrive in your career, you need to push through those things, so, the book is really about those strategies, right? So it's not about blaming you for, feeling this way, but it's, how do I equip myself with the tools to recognize my triggers, to have strategies in place when things come up. And for the where you can grab it, impostersyndromebook.com. That is where the book is available. There's also an audiobook if folks want to listen instead. I read it myself, which was a whole adventure on its own. Talk about imposter syndrome. Trying to listen to yourself for 6 hours is rough.
That is funny. You crack me up. Yes, definitely when you hear your own voice and you're like, "People listen to this every day." That's
Right.
wild. So, Tina, it would be great if we can put those links in the description box
Mhm.
related to your book so that we can follow up on that. So, I wanna talk to you a little bit about negotiation.
Mm.
I think this is very hard for people that are women and especially for Black women. It
Yep.
feels very uncomfortable. It feels very scary. You're like, I just got this job and I'm already trying to negotiate. What
Mhm.
are some of the steps, or how do you walk through your
Yeah.
trepidation about
Mm.
negotiation?
Oh, that's such a good question because right, like, you can talk about the steps, but how do you push through even though it's scary? And the answer is you gotta do it anyway, right? Like, I still get nervous, but I've been negotiating since I was 18. It's about doing it anyway, and being strategic with it. So, I have one thing that I tell every single person who talks to me about it, which is to just have something you're gonna say when you get the offer that gets you off the phone. Hey, thank you so much. I'm so excited about the offer. Could I get a copy of the benefits in writing and so I can look it over and get back to you? Then get off the phone. Because you don't have to in that moment do the calculations and decide this is going to be my counter offer, whatever. Like, you got to get off the phone, have your feelings, and it's good or bad, right? I once got an offer that was $20,000 more than my target. And I wanted to be like, yes, please, thank you. But I said, "Thank you so much. I'd love to see a copy of the benefits and get back to you." Got off the phone. And then that day, I saw a tweet. This was back when it was Twitter. It said, "Black women, whatever you were gonna ask for more." And I was like, "Dang, I still gotta negotiate." And I thought about it, and it was still, okay, so I got this offer. It was higher than my target. But if they made that same offer to a white guy coming in and he negotiates, now we're coming in at a gap, and that gap only gets wider with every increase, every bonus is a percentage of what you're getting, and that gap is just gonna get wider and wider. And so I did go back, I asked for another 15,000. We ended up on another 8,000. So I ended up at 28,000 more than my target, right? And that wouldn't have happened if I had tried to just in the moment say, like, "What do I feel about this offer?" So, yeah, the first thing, get off the phone. Um, this is I didn't mean to plug this specifically, but I do offer something called SOS calls, and it's where after you get the offer and you get the heck off the phone, then we get on a call and we talk through the offer, we talk about your counter offer and walk through what that's gonna look like so then you can feel confident going into that next conversation. Um, the other piece that I think is really important for folks is to think about that conversation as almost a team building exercise. It's not me versus them because they're too big. They're too big for me to go into a me versus them and feel confident. Instead, it's us. We are both so excited about this. How can we make it work? How can we get the best? How can we work together to get the best possible outcome for all of us? And just approaching it that way just takes so much of the pressure off of this. It's not like I'm playing hardball and if they don't do this, I'm going to walk, right? I'm so grateful for this opportunity. And now we get to have a relationship building conversation where we learn how to work together. And I get to see how you respond when I advocate for myself. 'cause I have had those very few cases where someone says, "I negotiated," and they pulled the offer, and that is it can be soul crushing, right? But when you think about it and you're like, if I was in that job and that's how they respond when someone advocates for themselves, what a blessing that they showed me that before I walked into the door. And obviously, when you need the job, like, it's hard to look at it that way, but in general, like, this is an opportunity for them to show you, "Here's how we work together with our employees who are gonna advocate for themselves."
Teen, I love the fact you have a SOS call. Yes, that's what we need. So you heard it first. You heard it right here. Get off the phone because there's a lot of pressure,
Yeah.
to answer the question. They right there and they know this. And so that's why
Right.
they like, what do you have to say? Yeah, let
Yep.
us know. So in addition to what you said about getting off the phone, you can also ask, how long do I have to make a decision? Like
Mm.
I'd like to just think about this for a day. I'd like to sleep this over.
Mhm.
When do you need a response from me? Just not feeling the pressure to say yes in that moment. I love that you
Exactly.
brought that up.
Right, and how long do I have to consider this? It implies, I'm not gonna tell you right now, right? You can say like, "Oh, that's so great. How long do I have to consider it?" Just so they know we're not ending this call with a final decision. There will be another conversation.
So, could you tell us about your podcast and how we can access your podcast? What is it about? Maybe it's like there's a theme in terms of the things that you're talking about,
Yeah.
obviously, but I just want everyone to have an idea of all of the different ways that we can contact you. Maybe there's a specific way that speaks to
Mhm.
one person over another. So,
Absolutely,
yeah.
yeah. So, the podcast, it's the Getting Black Women Paid podcast. You can find it wherever you listen to podcasts. So, if just a search "Getting Black Women Paid" should get you there. But there also is a YouTube channel. It's at Getting Black Women Paid. I can give you the links for for all of those things. But basically, we're talking about all things paid, right? So it's if you're launching a business, it's for career moves, it's for motivation for that morning routine. It's for how do you start a side hustle, right? And so, we try to touch all the different aspects of the things that go into getting the pay that we deserve. And some of it's mindset work, some of it's logistical, right? Um, we did just recently a two-part episode where one is on um, you know, negotiation strategies. And then the next one is on non-salary things you can negotiate for, right? Okay, they can't come up on salary as much as I wanted, but let me talk about my paid time off. Let me talk about my tuition reimbursement program or things like that. So we try to cover every aspect of it. We also bring on wonderful Black women. That is our uh, our origin story. Is you also appeared on the podcast. So I try to bring on other Black women experts, especially in areas that I don't have as much expertise in. Right? Like I actually recently had a conversation with a lawyer who talks about more the legal aspects of business ownership. Right? So it should be your place for all things getting paid. And yeah, I'll grab the links for you, and you can put them in the show notes so people can find that.
That's gonna be so good. We're gonna have so many links in the description
Yeah.
box. We have so much access to you, SOS calls, we got
Mhm.
podcasts, we got books. One of these should work for us
Yes.
to be able to get ourselves paid.
Yeah, and that's the hope is that, however you best learn, however you best engage with folks, that there's something out there for you to consume, right? And that's my hope. That was sort of my goal in writing the book, right, was, okay, not everyone can have a one-on-one coach and spend, thousands of dollars, but maybe they've got $20 they can buy a book
Yeah.
and sit with that, right? So that's my hope is to be able to reach as many amazing Black women as possible.
Yeah, that's a good goal. And I have read that Black women leave millions of dollars on the table.
Yes.
One side is going to be on us, the other side is obviously going to be on them. On them for being like, hey, they probably going to accept a lower salary anyway. So, like, as an employer, that's what I'm going to definitely offer them. And then
Right.
on us for not negotiating or not advocating for ourselves or being afraid of what could
Yeah.
happen. So for those of us team that have negotiated, we were feeling good. We were like, I got an extra 10. I am that girl. This was the
Mhm.
opportunity. I made it for myself. I'm super happy. You working in a job maybe a year and you find out that there are some white people at your job getting paid more than you're getting paid, but you negotiated and you felt
Yep,
good about that negotiation.
yep.
How do we feel about that? What do we do about that?
Ooh, yes, what you're saying is so real, like, you're describing some real situations, and I think the biggest thing to think about is it's always how do I move forward? It's not, "Oh, I didn't negotiate hard enough," or "I didn't do this, I didn't do that." Now I have new information. What am I gonna do with it? And maybe it's, "Hey, we're gonna be discussing compensation in my annual review, and I actually know that people at this level make this now." Or I've been doing some market research and, I'm getting paid under market for this. Can we talk about it? Right? Like it can be a conversation that you have moving forward. You can also, I mean, it depends because you might feel some kind of way. It could be something that's big enough that you're like, I don't want to be working with these people anymore. And that's legit, right? Like you gotta, what we don't need is for you to try to bury your feelings and then develop an ulcer. Right? We carry so many health problems directly related to the stress from work. So to me it's, you know, gather the information, see how you want to use it moving forward and decide what's the fight that's worth it and what's the fight you're just going to take somewhere else.
I love that you said that because you have some options. I love what
Mhm.
you said about now you have new information. So I think number 1 is not to, beat up on ourselves or be upset
Yeah.
about we didn't try hard enough like what you said. You tried.
Mhm.
You got something and that's amazing. It's not on you that the
Mhm.
system wants to exploit your labor.
Right.
And then number 2, making the decision like, am I going to negotiate this, like you said, in the annual review? That is a leverage point now that you know. It does depend, I feel like, on the organization because sometimes
Sure.
they specifically don't have people share their salaries so that you will not know that information. So if you're working there, it might not be good to be like, by the way, I know you paying X, da da da.
Right.
Like, you
Right.
could just be like, hey, just in general, I saw online that other people is making this at other organizations. So I just wanted to make sure my salary was also matching that, something like that.
Yeah.
Or this is my favorite teen is an exit strategy when you're like, all right, they played that game. I'm
Mhm.
being disrespected. Maybe it's time to move on. And you don't
Mhm.
necessarily have to move on in that moment, but maybe you're starting what is the exit strategy for me? How much money do I need to be able to make that pivot?
Yeah. And now I have more information about what to ask for in the next role.
Yes.
And I even wanna address folks who maybe didn't negotiate and find this out, right? And it's still, again, it's not about beating yourself up. I didn't know I could negotiate or I was just too nervous, I was too excited about the offer, whatever. But now that now that I've been on Dr. Maya's show, I'm taking this in and now I have new information. So the next time I know I'm gonna negotiate, right? That we just don't need to be spending time and energy on beating ourselves up for whatever things happen in the past. And it's all about how do I move forward? And maybe that is building an exit strategy, or maybe it's, negotiating further within your organization.
Yeah, that's a good point. It doesn't have to be a all or nothing. You could still stay there, you can still negotiate things, you can see how that works, or you could make an exit strategy. But now that you have the information, you know that you're going to need to move forward in some way.
Yeah.
And what you mentioned about, oh, this is a learning lesson, that's gonna probably come in healing, like, maybe after you have removed yourself, you
Yes.
had some time, then you're like, "Okay, so let's talk about lessons that we learned for the day." But
Yep.
that would be good to, like, reflect on that because I remember my first job, oh my gosh, Dean, I like, once we found out how everybody was being paid differently, I had made a commitment to myself. I was like, "I
Mhm.
didn't even know you could negotiate. I didn't know
Right.
that was a thing. I thought they gave you an offer, you took it."
Right.
And after that, I was like, I will
Mhm.
negotiate every single time.
Yes, ma'am.
negotiated successfully every single time after that, and I also was like, "I will not allow myself to be paid lower than what I'm worth," right?
Yeah.
So, one thing we haven't really talked about is the fact that you can also see what people are making at other organizations to be able to compare to what you should be making, as
Mhm.
well as when you see that job description, knowing what's that range, what's the maximum they're paying, what's the minimum. Yeah, can you talk a little bit about that and, like, specifically how we would know what we
Right.
should be getting paid in that moment?
Yeah. Well, and, certainly not every job is gonna post the range, but some do. Some states are requiring it. So one thing that you can do is look up similar jobs and maybe check, oh, if it's posted in Colorado, they might list the salary. And that will be, obviously salaries are different based on region as well, but it can give you an initial idea. I also love to go on Glassdoor. You can put in the title, the region you're in, years of experience, the industry, and they'll show you a little bar, or what is that called? Bell chart of, what people have submitted that their salaries are. And this is the thing I always caution. They're going to show you that little chart. You are not interested in anything below that 50 percentile. Every black woman who has a job has worked her butt off and is not average or lower, right? I'm not interested in what the average is. We're above average. So I'm usually targeting that like 50th to 75th percentile as the range that I'm looking. When I see what that is, that's the range I'm targeting when I'm going into negotiations. We're not interested in what people who are below average are making because that's been us for long enough. And we all know most of us are already exceptional at our roles. So, not interested.
Not interested. That's good. Yeah. Could you tell us how you ended up negotiating so much in the salary for Black women? When you had your SOS calls, what was that like? How were you able to motivate or encourage or inspire people to be able to negotiate and to
Sure.
get paid well?
Yeah. So, one of my one of my first, like, mentees before I was even doing the business, she calls me her audacity coach. But, a lot of it is about that self-esteem. Part of it starts with, "Tell me about your current situation." And all of us have these same stories, right? All of us have these stories of being undervalued, passed up for the promotion, finding out someone's getting paid more than us, whatever it is. And we kind of talk about those things and we talk about how we feel about those things. And through that conversation, which I try to build up their confidence in what they actually deserve. Right. And so that's part of it is just starting with that internal work of, hey, like I'm killing it at my job. I should be getting more. Sometimes we'll actually get on Glassdoor together and we'll do the market research and I'll be saying like, "Okay, so I heard you're making 68,000. Well, here I'm looking and people at that role are making 80 to 100. How do you feel about that? Let's talk about that." Right? And and again, I've had folks who in their first job change, even a parallel move, have more than doubled their income from a single negotiation. And part of it is realizing that they are worthy of being in that higher, um, that higher part of the bell curve for that role, seeking that out, and when they get the offer, ask for more, right? And we can even script out what you're gonna say or make some bullet points for you so you don't get lost on anything. And it's really, yeah, it starts with that confidence, and then it's the logistical part, right? What is my target? Let me do the research, and let me practice in the mirror. Let me practice what I wanna say to be able to make that ask. One of the hardest things is to sit in the silence after you've made your ask, right? "Oh, after doing my market research, I was, thank you for the offer." It was, let's say the offer was 100,000. "Oh, this is so exciting." But as I was doing my market research, I was finding that I was really hoping for more like 115. And then you just stop talking. And it's so hard because so many of us wanna say, "Oh, unless that's not in the budget," or, "Oh, but I was well, really 105 to 115 will be okay." We start to undersell ourselves just because we're uncomfortable in that silence and we wanna make it more comfortable. So I always tell people make your ask, sit in the silence, take a slow sip of water if you need to, smile and nod, right? Like, wasn't that thing I asked for reasonable, right? Because oftentimes the person you're talking to isn't even authorized to say yes or no. So you downplaying yourself in that conversation, you're just hurting yourself. Usually it's going to be, okay, let me take it back to whoever who sets the budget and I'll let them know. So why are you going to undercut yourself before they've even had a chance to bring back what you asked, right? So yeah, and again, it's practicing. As you said, you made a commitment to negotiate every time, and then you did it every time. And I think every time it gets a little easier because you've done it before. It doesn't mean it stops being hard or you stop being nervous, but the more you keep doing it, the more you realize you can do it.
I just wanna sit on that and take the sip of water now.
Right?
Yeah, that was really, really good what you said, like, being comfortable with being uncomfortable,
Yes.
and you are so right. I have witnessed for multiple people or even for myself, you were talking to somebody that's like, "I actually need to talk to somebody else. We actually need
Mhm.
to go figure that out." So just pausing, putting it out there, and just letting it be. Just letting it be. And like you said, if an organization rescinds the offer, that tells you a lot about them. It will hurt in the moment if something like that happened, but overall, you never want to work in a culture that is not valuing you, that is punishing you for negotiating, which you're probably not, is even a problem. You're probably
Mhm.
just asking for what you deserve. So it's a problem if they think that's okay. This
Right.
is not like this is tangentially related to this conversation, but I remember I was talking to a friend and I really like to wear my hair natural,
Mhm.
got the braids right now.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I'm really afraid. I think I need to take the braids out or I need to wear my hair a certain way because
Yeah.
the job XYZ. She was like, then you don't need to work in a place that doesn't appreciate your natural hair.
Mm.
And I said, you're right. Okay. So, in a
Yeah.
similar way, if they're not appreciating the way you're showing up, if they're not appreciating you in terms of what you're making,
Mhm.
you're better off to
Right.
not be in that situation. I agree with you. I think it can be difficult. You out here looking for a job,
Right.
you need them benefits,
Mhm.
but in the long term, probably
Yeah.
looking back, it would have been better not to be in that situation.
Right. And I wanna be real here, the job market's hard right now, and I don't give the same advice to someone who has a runway, who has savings, as to someone who's like, "I need a job today so I can make rent tomorrow." Right? That's a different situation. And what I say to folks is that your next move doesn't have to be the last move, right? Get to something where you've got some income and then keep looking because you don't have to stay at that place for a year, 2 years, what have you, just because you took the offer, right? Maybe it's, "Hey, I needed to get some income urgently. I took the role. 3 months later, I found something better." And I can speak to that. "Oh, I found this great opportunity I couldn't pass up." You can talk about why you were only at a place for so long. But so the advice I give to folks who are saying like, "Hey, I hear you, but I cannot afford to not take the offer or to, risk them rescinding, what have you." Yeah, do it. Do what you have to do. And once you get into a more stable situation, keep looking for that better thing because you do still deserve that better thing.
That was so deep. I am with you. Let's really work on like dismantling the idea that we have to stay in these jobs forever. And maybe you can speak to this because like previous
Mhm.
generations have been
Yeah,
like at the job forever. They was waiting on that pension, but then they want to come at us at us millennials. But girl, who's in a job that they actually want to be in? So
right.
we are out here like we are not going to sit here and just
Mhm.
tolerate the things. Like if it's time for us to go, we're comfortable with that. So how do you unlearn the fact of like being in a job for 30 years? What you mentioned, you got into
Yeah,
a position, but it wasn't exactly what you wanted, and you got to pivot out of that.
yeah.
How do we work on that?
Oh, it's tough, and, for me, I've always been really good at quitting stuff. I didn't mention this at the beginning. I was a full-time teacher with my own classroom for 6 school days. Not 6 years, not 6 months. We're talking about a week and a day, but it was not it. I was I was having panic attacks and vomiting. I was driving to school and I saw the median and I thought, "Oh, if I drove my car into the median, I could go to the hospital instead of to school." That was it. That was it. It's not for me, right? And so many of us put up with stuff until it is hurting us, until we have to take medical leave because we're in the hospital with something that is stress induced. Um, and yeah, my mom was at the same company for 44 years before she retired. But companies don't treat employees how they used to. And the pay is not what we need it to be. Typically, the best way to get more pay is to move to another role, to move to another organization, and things are different than they were for the generation ahead of us. So, in terms of unlearning that, I think the biggest thing is um, trying to treat yourself how you would treat a friend. Like, if you describe your work situation and you think, well, if my best friend was telling me this, what would I tell her she deserved? What would I tell her to do in that situation? Would I say, well, suck it up because you want to make sure you're there for at least 2 years? Or would I say, girl, this is hurting you, get out? And so it's about treating ourselves the way we would treat a dear friend and realizing that we deserve something different.
That is perfect. Treat ourselves how we would treat a friend. I notice a lot of times the way we talk to ourselves,
Yes.
what we expect from ourselves is completely different than the way we would talk to or what we would expect for our
Mhm.
friends. Like we can be really supportive when it
Mhm.
comes to other people, but not so much with ourselves. So I will also say with this teen, like it could be just helpful or necessary sometimes to have someone else mirror back to you the things.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
like if you are not strong enough or in the place, you done been through a lot and you just can't do it. That's what your SOS call is for.
Right?
Sometimes you just need somebody else to say it, somebody else to validate your
Mhm.
feelings around that to be like, okay, I do deserve more.
Yeah. And, one of the things I talk about in my book is your hype squad, right? Those people who are going to hype you up, who remember the awesome things you've done and can remind you when you forget. But not all of us have that circle of friends who understand our career goals or who get it or who have been through it. And so that's one place where coaches come in is because, sometimes our circle of friends don't, maybe they don't have the same aspirations, they don't have the same experiences, or they don't know how to help me get from point A to point B because they've never been there. Sometimes we need a coach to to kind of lay out what those next steps are and to, as you said, like be that mirror and hear and kind of feedback into you. One of the biggest things I do as a coach is um, tell people how I think they or like let me how do I phrase this? Like someone will be talking about a business idea and they're like, "Oh, I'm going to help this kind of person. We're going to do this kind of thing." And then we're having a conversation about something else and they're talking about like a side project and they light up. And they're like, "Oh, well, when we do this, we do," like they just totally change. And for me, I can hold up that mirror and say, "Hey, I know we've been talking about this business idea, but when I saw you really light up was when we were talking about this other thing. How would you feel about that being the business idea?" And they're like, "Oh, wow, you're right." Like that some of it is just when you're talking to someone else, they can see something in you that you didn't really think about until they reflect it back to you, and then it hits you like a ton of bricks, like, "Oh my god, you're right. I'm not even a little bit excited about this," right? But this other thing is really where my passion is, right? And so that I think is, just invaluable.
Yeah. That is beautiful. Having a hype squad, just in general,
Yeah.
you should just have a hype squad just for life.
Y
We
right,
got a hype squad on deck.
right.
to
Yeah.
remind us in the midst of the thing. So that's good.
Mhm.
Earlier, you had mentioned that the jobs are not treating people how they did in the past, where your mom worked for 40 years. What is
Yeah.
it that is happening right now that's different from?
Whew. I mean some of it is just inflation and wages, right? When my parents moved to Chicago with, like, however much they had in their pockets, and they were like, "I'll find something," or whatever, and then they were able to buy a house, they were able to raise 2 kids, send them to college, that kind of stuff. Things cost so much more now, and we still get paid the same or barely more, right? And so, like, part of it is just that wages have not gone up with inflation. But I think along with that is just attitudes in terms of employees and, like, oh gosh, I mean, it's it's a lot of things. I feel like just societally, um, I mean, we've let the rich get richer in a way, and that is just unacceptable. And corporations are designed to answer to their investors and not to their customers or their employees. And so the incentive is get as much profit as possible and cut as many costs as possible, and not necessarily, treat our employees the best and, like, have a really good name, and that will be what elevates us, right? Because, well, we still have our quarterly report to the investors, and they need to see those numbers going up. And they're not going to see that because we give excellent health care to our employees. They're not going to see that because we established a wellness program or because we invested in promoting internally and training people up. That kind of stuff is not rewarded systemically. What's rewarded is whatever cuts the most costs and raises the most profit in the short term. And so I do think that's been a huge part of how corporations view their employees and how they treat them.
Very helpful to know that. I will also just add the continuous line of oppression that has just been to that black women always getting paid the least amount, white men always making the most amount, and then
Yeah.
people can kind of fit in the middle. Even in a way, sometimes that black men are able to make more than white women. So I
Mhm.
just wanted to point out the fact that sometimes we are focused on being black people and diasporically how we're being mistreated, but there are some ways that being men definitely
Yep.
allows them to have more of an advantage, and they will be making more than white women. So,
Mm.
what is the consistent piece of oppression is going to be that women are making less.
Right. And it's that intersection, right, of race and gender that so many black women are experiencing. Um, Whereas, like, if you look at the gender pay gap, it's different by race, and I think most recently things were showing that, like, Asian women were making pretty close to what white men make, but, like, those things kind of fluctuate. Um, I think it's really important to kind of look at those things separately, like look at race and gender separately, but then also look at the conflation of them, because the stereotypes, for instance, of women are not necessarily the same as the stereotypes of black women, right? Like, certainly lots of women in the workplace are treated like, if you're assertive, okay, well then you're a B. Like, I don't know what your swearing policy is,
Yeah, no,
but
that works. That
but
works.
but but on top of that, the black woman can be labeled as the angry black woman, and there's, like, an additional dynamic there. If she's too quiet, what's she hiding? If she's too right now, she's not approachable, right? Like, there's additional layers that come with being a black woman that black men don't experience, that white women don't experience, right? That there's something there in that, like, conflation of things. And then you get into all kinds of other things, right? Black trans women are going to experience something different than black cis women, right? So, like, all of these different layers kind of come together. And I think for us, the biggest thing we can do is be in community with each other, because there's nothing like talking with someone who gets it, right? Like, so many times when I'm in a space with black women and they're telling a story about work, everybody's like got that face on like, "Girl, I know, I've been there." And it just
Yeah.
feels less lonely. So many of us are the only on our team or the only in our department. And so part of it is just finding that community where people get it and can give advice. "Hey, this is how I handled it when that happened to me."
Yeah, that is really, really good. Being a community will definitely help each other. Another thing that we can do is warn people about certain jobs, about
Yes.
certain bosses, like that
Mhm.
grapevine of like, I had this experience, just letting you know, you can decide whatever you want. We still got to let people do what they want. You can
Mhm.
decide whatever you want, but I'm going to let you know right now. This
Right.
is not the move. If you're looking for these specific things, I think too, for me, the way I look at work is kind of like dating. Like, you
Mm.
just don't have to marry or commit to the first person you get with, right? Like,
Right.
you deserve the right to shop around too.
Yes.
Every job is not gonna be the same. Like, even for me, I had, like, a really wonderful, fantastic opportunity, but just kinda what they wanted me to do was not really aligning with who I was as a person. And so,
Mm.
like you said, doing something where it's like you really lighten up, you like what you do. I don't think we have to continue that stereotype of like everybody just hates work. That's just what it is. It's a
Right.
means to an end. Like, no, we can do something else, right, team? Like,
Yeah.
there can be other opportunities. We don't have to just survive. We
Yeah.
should thrive.
Oh, absolutely. And it's possible that you don't have a dream job, right? I
Okay.
for a long time, when people would say, like, "What's your dream job?" I'm like, "I don't dream of having a job." Like, I don't right? What is it? I don't dream of labor, right? And so it's okay if the dream is to retire as early as possible, right? It's okay if there isn't a job that you feel like you're gonna love, but you do need a job that you're not gonna hate and that's gonna treat you with respect and that's gonna give you enough balance in your life to be able to do the things you do love, right? Like maybe you're not someone who's going to find a job that like lights you up and fills you with purpose, but you need it to be a job that's going to pay you enough and give you time and space to enjoy your life. You know, and for some people maybe it is I have a dream job, I want to do it. But if you're watching this and you're like, "Hey, I can't think of a job like that." That's okay, but you need a job that you can tolerate where they're going to treat you well, they're going to give you vacation, and then you can spend that time, energy, and money on your life and the things that you do enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point that you made there. Yeah. You might not have a dream job, and that's okay, but you know what makes you happy and what doesn't.
Yes.
And as a person that's like had a range of jobs, I can tell you that sometimes it was like, this is really good. I'm getting treated really well, but I just don't like what I'm doing. So for me, it was like time to pivot. But some people
Sure.
would tell me, see, they were like, I would have stayed. Like, there was no problems. Like, what is it? But if
Yeah.
there's something that's just not clicking for you, that's okay too.
Mhm.
Or I know somebody that's like, I refuse to work corporate jobs. It's just too stressful. So I'm gonna take this job that is like not my favorite, but it's
Mhm.
calm. I get my vacation time. I
Yeah.
could do things with my life. I had just said a quote of like, decrease my pay and increase my peace. You know, like
Mm.
sometimes the jobs where you're
Yeah.
working super hard, they're gonna pay you super well, but you come out and you be bored, you be stressed. You mentioned all
Yes.
the things. You crying in a car every single day. You like feeling sick to your stomach. Like, is it worth it to be paid well, but to hate your life and not be able? I've also seen this team, people that passed before their time. They
Yeah.
was so stressed with these jobs. Like,
Yeah.
it was done. Or people get to retirement and then don't want to do nothing. It's just like, I'm so tired from
Right.
all that I had to do. I cannot enjoy life anymore. What are you saying? I'm just
Yeah.
trying to heal from what happened.
Yeah. Yeah. And even before retirement, if you can't enjoy your evenings or your weekends because of your day-to-day work, then maybe that's not it.
It's not the move. And so, like we said, you can be in that job looking for something else. It's not that you got to let that job go that day, but you be like, let me start an exit plan. How much money do
Mhm.
I need to be able to get out of here? How much longer can I tolerate? Maybe it's just like about two more checks and then I'm a bounce.
Right.
Like you just talk to
Yeah.
yourself, figure it out
Mhm.
for yourself. What does that mean for you? So for me, with that job that I actually really liked that I left, I was like, it ain't no problem. I'm gonna work another 3 months. I'm gonna collect these checks for another 3 months because I'm safe and comfortable. So there ain't no problem here.
Yeah.
And then I'm gonna do my pivot. Or maybe sometimes it happens, they really tried it with you and you like, today is my last day. The very
Right.
extreme case where it's just that's the last time you gonna talk to me like that.
Right.
Like it could be arranged. You got to fill it out. You got to talk to yourself. What I would say is that if it's not your hype squad, don't listen to what other people are saying because there'll be people
Mm.
like, girl, you should stay. Girl, you be making this. Girl, it don't matter if you happy. Like this is the opportunity. You should be so grateful. Where's your hype
Mm.
squad? What did your hype squad say? What did
Right.
they say? Because your hype squad is going to know you more than other people that have been indoctrinated to work.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. And right, anyone who's telling you, "Oh, you should do this, you should do that," like, they're not the ones who have to live with it. They're not the ones who have to go in, day out, feeling treated a certain way. I had a job once where I just felt invisible, and I can't
Mhm.
quantify this with an amount of money, so it doesn't really matter what the salary was. When I went in there, I felt bad. I remember I was walking to my desk in the morning and someone like smiled and said good morning, and I was about to respond and I realized they were talking to the blonde lady behind me, and I was like, "Oh, okay." Like, that's just not a way I wanna feel every day. And, like, no one can tell me, "Oh, well, the strategic move is this," or, "Well, since you're making that." No, I don't wanna live like this, and that has nothing to do with other people's advice.
Great point. We haven't even gotten into work culture about like just how people are treating you in general, being invisible or seeing you as a threat. Like you talked about the
Mhm.
stereotypes of how we've seen black women. And even I don't know if you know about this, but like mammified positions now, like back in the day, right? Obviously being put into that mammy role and
Mhm.
being domesticated, working in a white household. Now, today, there are mammified positions that are not like that, but very parallel to it. It's
Yeah.
like black women taking care of people,
Mhm.
being responsible for the discipline, doing things that are not necessarily in the job description, but
Yep.
like somebody's sad about something. So you're the one that they go to. You're the one using your emotional labor, still almost like a mammy, but now a
Mhm.
different version of that, a
Yeah.
spin on that.
Yeah, and one thing that helps, people put that in perspective real quick is when you talk about free labor, for especially for Black women. It's like, are they paying you for that? Because you know what it's called when someone is taking your labor for free, and that can hit in a way, I think, for Black women that it doesn't necessarily for other people, is I'm not giving any of my labor away for free. You want me to be on that committee? What's the stipend? You want me to, train this person, advise them? Sure. What's the extra pay I'm gonna get during that time? Because and that's not to say like don't don't take on responsibilities at your job, but be strategic about it and don't just always be the one volunteering to, for me, a software engineer, somehow I'm the one taking notes at the meeting. Like, that's not my job, but I'm the one who offered because it was quiet and I wanted to fill that silence and make everybody else comfortable, or because I'm good, all that stuff. Just try to be strategic about not taking on all of those non-promotable tasks and instead be doing the things that are giving you visibility, that you're going to bring to your next evaluation, to be saying, here's why I need a promotion and a raise.
That's it. That's it right there. We do so much labor that we do not get paid for. We feel bad. We want to feel the silence. This is why to employers, like we are like the ideal person sometimes to hire because I'm gonna
Yep.
just say it. We will accept a lower salary. We will do the things to fill the silence. They know
Mhm.
they can always come to you or depend on you. You're probably
Yeah,
going to work more than necessary trying to prove yourself in that job.
yeah,
All the expertise and knowledge that we have, but yet they can pay us lower for that, right? Like I've seen
mhm,
the cases where these white men, you will have the same degrees that they have, and they coming at way higher. You
yep,
didn't even know you could get paid that type of
right,
money, right?
right,
And a thing too that I think is difficult for us as Black people is not knowing or just like historically having access to that type of money that you didn't even know you could have gotten paid that
yeah,
type of money. And so, one of the examples, and this is like way off, but still kind of related, is that I saw King Richard, that was the story about Serena and Venus Williams. And at
yeah,
the end of the story, it was like somebody wanted to pay them X amount of money to like sign them for the deal for tennis. They end up signing a deal that was like 10 times,
yeah,
the amount. But when they first got that, they were excited about that
of
offer,
course,
right? They had never seen that type of money in their life. So they're
of
like, this
course,
is great. When
yeah,
they could be making way more than that. We just
yeah,
don't even know what we don't know.
yeah, and that's why we gotta talk about it. It's taboo to talk about money. It only helps the company when nobody's gonna talk about what they're earning.
Yep.
And so the more we can normalize talking about it, that's why even when I give examples, I try to say what the amount was so people get a sense of, or even just get used to the idea of talking about how much we make so that we know what to expect and that those numbers don't sound so impossible or so out there because we've heard them before.
Absolutely, absolutely. Like that is a way that this oppression continues is because we don't talk about it. So we
Yeah.
got to have conversations. I saw this map of the US and it was like how much money you need to be making per year to survive, and it was horrible. It's like California, you should be making like 130,000. I'm like, what are we saying?
Mhm.
Even in the South, it's like at least 80,000, like
Yeah.
the inflation, like what you talked about, the increase of what we need to make just to survive. This is not to thrive. It was just like being in
Right.
that place.
Right.
This
This
is
is
what
to
you should
like
be
pay
making.
rent and eat. Like,
Pay rent and eat.
mhm.
Pay rent and eat.
Yeah.
Okay, earlier you had mentioned that there could be other things we negotiate other than the salary. Could you tell us a few of the things that could be negotiable if we can't get an increase on the salary?
Yeah, absolutely. So some of it still is money. It could be a signing bonus. It could be an increase in your bonus percentage that you're like eligible for annually. Um, but you want to be careful with that because while that changes your overall compensation, your future raises are still going to be based on a percentage of your salary. So, you got to take that with a grain of salt. But sometimes those bonuses and things might come from different budgets. So you might be more likely to get something like that than a specific increase in the salary. Certainly paid time off, um, other kinds of benefits like I think we talked about tuition reimbursement. One of the things with that is sometimes there's a rule like, oh, you have to be an employee for a year before you can get tuition reimbursement. But if you're like, hey, I'm already in a program or I'm considering this program, would you consider waiving that 1 year requirement, as part of my compensation package? I actually once did that with maternity leave. I was 6 months pregnant and they had a rule you had to be an employee for a year to get the full maternity leave benefits. And I said, hey, could we waive that? And they did. And that's thousands of dollars, right? Like that wasn't a change in my salary, but for me, that was such a huge benefit. So you want to think about what's important to you. Is it flexible work hours? Is it, I want to work hybrid and only come in 2 days a week? Like what are the things that are important to you? Maybe it's a stipend for your home office or, I'm going to be using my phone during the job. Could you pay my phone bill? Um, Maybe it's I'm going to have to move for this job. Can I get reimbursed for moving expenses, right? So there are all kinds of ways to navigate beyond just salary, and it's about, looking one at what benefits they already offer, but then trying to figure out, okay, what's really important to me? It's really important, I'm making this pivot. I want to make sure I develop as quickly as possible. Will you pay for my certification? Will you pay to send me to conferences? that kind of professional development budget, right? So there are different things you can ask for related to your development, which is that one's a win-win, right? Because they are now getting someone with more skills, and you get to take those with you when you go as well.
That's great. That's great. So I hope that this is helpful to somewhere out there in the world. We are now at time. I wanted to know, did you have any final thoughts, anything that you want to leave our subscribers with? A majority of them are Black women. So you are talking
Mhm.
right to your target audience. If
Mhm.
there was anything specifically that you wanted to let them know.
I think the biggest thing is there's something that people say all the time when we talk about salary or even pricing for your business. People say, know your worth. And I actually steer clear of that phrase because your worth as a human has no monetary value, right? There's no amount of money where someone could own you. That comes back to that free labor, right? So instead of knowing your worth, I want you to know you're worthy and that no number's too high. That's it.
That was deep. That was so deep. Oh my gosh. Okay. Let us know. Remind us again how we can contact you, how we can get one of them SOS calls. It's
Yes,
really the
ma'am.
SOS call for me because I'm like, you don't know how many of us need that. Yes. How can we
Yes.
contact you?
So on social media, I'm mostly on LinkedIn at Tine Zekis. Um, Again, the podcast, Getting Black Women Paid, anywhere that you listen to your podcasts, or you can go on YouTube at Getting Black Women Paid. For the book, impostersyndromebook.com. I also do coach. And one of the things I'm most excited about, I recently started a subscription package. It's called Pocket Coaching with Teen. I had a client say, oh, I just wish I had a little teen in my pocket for, those moments when I just need a quick boost or something. And so it's a monthly subscription, $197 a month, and you have access to me through Slack. So you can send a message or a voice note, and I'll get back to you usually within a business day. And it's for whatever you're working on. So I'll give you the link for that too, but it's gettingblackwomenpaid.com/pocket. And then, yeah, the Getting Black Women Paid site is also where you can find things like the SOS call and my other coaching services.
That is wonderful. So I want you all to know that Teen is just so kind and so gracious and has created this for us. Getting Black women paid is the passion here. It is so critically important. We need to do this. We need to stop working for just these coins. We could get so much more. Why do the rich people just get to be rich all of the time?
Right.
Let's spread that wealth,
Mm.
redistribution of income, okay? That's what needs to be happening.
Yes,
So we need
ma'am.
to
Yes.
yes, right? We need to get ours too, okay?
Mm.
We need to get ours too. We've already done enough work that we have not been paid for. We
Yep.
deserve to get the money that we, are owed at this time. So
Yeah.
Teen is here. There are so many resources. We're going to have all of this in the description box. Thank you so much for coming by and talking to the audience. We really, on behalf of all of the women that will watch this, we really thank you for your commitment to the negotiation process because this is very difficult. This is
Yeah.
challenging. This wasn't a thing that we learned growing up. They should have had a class like this in college. They didn't, but you're here to
Yes.
help us move forward. So, okay,
Uh,
to all of the subscribers out there, please don't forget to like, to comment, and to subscribe if you have not. And definitely make sure that you check out Teen. Fantastic resource.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. And thanks for stopping by. I'll also have in the description box the session that we did together so that people can watch
Yes.
that as well. So we are here, we support you, and we want you to get paid.
Mm, absolutely.
Okay, talk to you all next time.